Ed Sullivan stood backstage at CBS Studio 50, holding a piece of paper with the strangest song title he'd ever seen on his show. "I Want a Hippopotamus for Christmas." He shook his head in disbelief. This was supposed to be the next big Christmas hit? A 10-year-old girl from Oklahoma singing about wanting a hippopotamus? Ed had been in the entertainment business for over a decade, and this was easily the most ridiculous booking he'd ever approved. But what happened in the next 4 minutes would not only create one of the most beloved Christmas performances in television history, it would teach Ed Sullivan that sometimes the most unlikely acts create the most unforgettable moments. Before you hear this incredible story, hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to witness is how a tiny girl with a crazy Christmas wish turned Ed Sullivan's skepticism into one of his most treasured memories. To understand why Ed Sullivan was so doubtful about this booking, you need to know what the Ed Sullivan Show represented in 1953. This wasn't just any variety show. Big Ed. This was America's cultural headquarters. Ed had built his reputation on presenting polished professional entertainment to families across the nation. Every Sunday night at 8 p.m., 50 million Americans trusted Ed to bring them quality acts that would entertain without embarrassing anyone. Ed took this responsibility seriously. He was methodical about his bookings, careful about his image, and deeply protective of his show's reputation. When he said, "We have a really big show tonight," America believed him, because Ed Sullivan didn't book acts unless he was convinced they belonged on the most important stage in television. But this Gayla Peevey booking was different. It had come about through a series of circumstances that Ed still couldn't quite believe. The story began 2 weeks earlier, when Ed had traveled to Oklahoma City for a special live broadcast of Toast of Town, the original name of his show. During his visit, local entertainment coordinators had insisted he meet a little girl who'd been performing at local venues with what they claimed was a potential Christmas hit. Ed's first reaction had been polite but skeptical. A Christmas song, in November, sung by a child, about a hippopotamus? But the Oklahoma coordinators were persistent. "Mr. Sullivan, you have to hear her sing it. This isn't just any novelty song. There's something special about how this little girl performs it." Reluctantly, Ed agreed to listen. Gayla Peevey, barely 10 years old with pigtails and a gap-toothed smile, had stood in the small Oklahoma venue and sung "I Want a Hippopotamus for Christmas" with such genuine enthusiasm and perfect comedic timing that Ed found himself smiling despite his reservations. The song itself was completely absurd. Written by John Rocks, it was about a little girl who wanted a hippopotamus for Christmas. Not a doll, not a toy, but an actual hippopotamus. The lyrics were filled with childish logic. "Hippopotamuses are vegetarians, so they won't eat you. There's room in the 2-car garage, and they could give the hippo massages." But there was something about Gayla's performance that transcended the silly lyrics. She sang with complete conviction, as if wanting a hippopotamus for Christmas was the most reasonable request in the world. Her delivery was natural, unforced, genuinely funny without trying too hard to be cute. Still, Ed had serious reservations about bringing this act to national television. "It's a novelty song," he told his producers when he returned to New York. "Novelty songs don't translate to television. They work once, maybe twice, then people get tired of them. And this is a Christmas song in November. The timing is all wrong." But his Oklahoma experience had planted a seed of doubt about his own judgment. The audience reaction had been extraordinary. Adults were laughing, children were singing along, and everyone seemed genuinely charmed by both the song and Gayla's performance. Meanwhile, Columbia Records was pushing hard for the booking. Mitch Miller, the legendary AANDR man who was building Columbia's roster of popular music, had signed Gayla specifically because he believed "I Want a Hippopotamus for Christmas" could be a massive hit. But Miller needed television exposure to make that happen. Ed Miller argued during a phone call, "This song has everything. It's funny, it's memorable, it's perfect for families, and the kid is a natural performer. Trust me on this one." Ed respected Mitch Miller's judgment, but he was still hesitant. "Mitch, I've built my show on quality acts. Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, established performers who know how to handle live television. A 10-year-old singing about a hippopotamus, that's not the Sullivan Show brand." "Sometimes," Miller replied, "the best entertainment comes from places you don't expect. Give her a chance, Ed. What's the worst that could happen?" The worst that could happen, Ed thought, was that a ridiculous novelty song performed by a child would make his show look amateurish. But Miller's enthusiasm was infectious, and Ed found himself reconsidering. The decision was made during a production meeting the following week. Ed's staff was reviewing potential bookings for the upcoming shows when someone mentioned that they needed to fill a slot in the November broadcast. Something light, family-friendly, appropriate for the approaching holiday season. "What about the hippo girl from Oklahoma?" suggested his head producer almost as a joke. Ed looked around the room at his staff. These were people whose judgment he trusted, who had helped him build the most successful variety show on television. If they were even half serious about this booking. "All right," Ed said finally. "We'll book her. But this is an experiment. If it doesn't work, we never speak of it again." The call went out to Gayla's family in Oklahoma City. They would pay to fly her and her mother to New York, put them up in a hotel, and give Gayla a spot on the Ed Sullivan Show to perform "I Want a Hippopotamus for Christmas." For the Peevey family, this was the opportunity of a lifetime. For Ed Sullivan, it was the biggest risk he'd taken since Elvis Presley. The week leading up to Gayla's appearance, Ed found himself second-guessing the decision constantly. He watched rehearsal footage of other acts, read reviews of competitors' shows, tried to imagine how a hippopotamus song would fit among the sophisticated entertainment he usually presented. "Maybe we should reconsider," he told his wife Sylvia over dinner 3 nights before the broadcast. "I'm not sure America is ready for a singing child who wants a hippopotamus." Ed, Sylvia replied, with the wisdom that had guided him through countless career decisions. "You've always said that great entertainment comes from authenticity. If this little girl is authentically excited about hippopotamuses, maybe that's exactly what people need to see." Gayla arrived in New York 2 days before the broadcast, accompanied by her mother. This was her first time in New York City, her first time in a professional television studio, her first experience with the kind of production values that made the Ed Sullivan Show the gold standard of variety television. Ed watched her during the technical rehearsal and was struck by how unintimidated she seemed. While adult performers often became nervous or tried to change their act to suit television, Gayla performed the song exactly the same way she had in Oklahoma, with complete commitment to the absurd premise and genuine joy in the performance. "She's not trying to be anything other than who she is," Ed observed to his director. "That's rare, especially in children. Usually they get self-conscious when they realize how many people are watching." The rehearsal went smoothly, but Ed was still anxious. Television had a way of exposing insincerity, of making calculated charm look forced. If Gayla's natural appeal didn't translate to the cameras, the segment could become uncomfortable to watch. Sunday night, November 22, 1953, the Ed Sullivan Show went live to the nation. Ed did his opening monologue, introduced the first guests, maintained his usual professional demeanor while privately wondering if he was about to make a fool of himself on national television. Finally, it was time for Gayla. Ed walked to his mark, looked directly into the camera, and delivered his introduction. "I was out in Oklahoma City recently on a very delightful visit, and on the show is an amazing little girl by the name of Gayla Peevey." Ed's introduction was longer than usual, almost as if he was trying to prepare the audience for something unusual. He explained that Gayla was making records for Columbia, that Christmas records were made early, that this was supposed to be a big hit. He was setting expectations, giving context, hoping to frame the performance in a way that would make it seem less ridiculous. Then Gayla walked onto the stage, and Ed's worries began to evaporate. She looked exactly like what she was meant, a 10-year-old girl from Oklahoma, who was genuinely excited to be on television. She wore a simple dress, her hair was styled in the pigtails that had become her trademark, and she approached the microphone with the confidence of someone who had never doubted that wanting a hippopotamus was perfectly reasonable. The opening notes of the song began, and Gayla started singing, "I want a hippopotamus for Christmas, only a hippopotamus will do." Within seconds, Ed could see that something magical was happening. The studio audience, which had been politely attentive, began to smile, then chuckle, then laugh with genuine delight. This wasn't forced entertainment. It was joy happening in real time. Gayla sang each verse with perfect comic timing, emphasizing the absurd details that made the song so endearing. When she sang about not wanting no dinky tinker toy, her voice carried exactly the right note of childhood disdain for inadequate presents. When she explained that hippopotamuses are vegetarians and wouldn't eat her up, she delivered the line with the logic of a child who had clearly thought this through. Ed watched from the wings, amazed by how completely Gayla inhabited the song. She wasn't performing childhood, She was childhood, genuine and unaffected, and absolutely convinced that her hippopotamus request made perfect sense. The audience was eating it up. Adults were laughing not at Gayla, but with her, charmed by her sincerity, and delighted by the song's clever lyrics. Children in the studio were clearly enchanted, seeing someone their own age on the biggest stage in America, singing about the most wonderfully ridiculous Christmas wish imaginable. When Gayla reached the verse about having room in the two-car garage and giving the hippo massages, the audience burst into appreciative laughter. This wasn't just a novelty song anymore. It was a perfect piece of family entertainment that worked on multiple levels. The song ended to thunderous applause, and Ed walked onto the stage with a smile that was completely genuine. For the first time in the entire booking process, he felt completely confident that this had been the right decision. "Very, very well done," he said to Gayla, and he meant it. "How old are you?" Or "How young are you?" 10, Gayla replied with the straightforward honesty that had made her performance so charming. Ed continued the brief interview, asking about Oklahoma City, giving his regards to the people there, telling Gayla she was a very big star. And then something unexpected happened. Gayla caught up in the moment, and the excitement of having performed successfully on national television, spontaneously kissed Ed on the cheek. The audience erupted in delighted laughter and applause. Ed, momentarily flustered but clearly charmed, responded with his characteristic wit. Unfortunately, that sort of thing always happens when they're too young or too old. It was a perfect ending to a perfect segment. The spontaneous kiss added exactly the right note of genuine affection and childlike enthusiasm to cap off a performance that had exceeded everyone's expectations. After the cameras stopped rolling, Ed found himself surrounded by his production staff, all of them grinning and congratulating him on the booking. "Ed, that was brilliant," his head producer said. "The phones are already ringing. People want to know where they can buy the record." But Ed was thinking about something else. "Did you see how she performed? No artifice, no calculation, just pure joy in the song. That's what great entertainment should be." The immediate aftermath proved that Ed's instincts and his willingness to take a risk had been correct. "I Want a Hippopotamus for Christmas" became exactly the hit that Mitch Miller had predicted, climbing the charts throughout December and becoming a Christmas standard that would be played for generations. But more than the commercial success, the performance became a defining moment for the Ed Sullivan Show. It demonstrated that Ed's platform could showcase not just established stars, but authentic talent in whatever form it appeared, even if that form was a 10-year-old girl with an impossible Christmas wish. Years later, when Ed reflected on his most memorable bookings, he always included Gayla Peevey. "That little girl taught me something important," he would say. "Sometimes the most sophisticated audience in the world just wants to believe in something wonderful, even if it's as ridiculous as wanting a hippopotamus for Christmas." The performance also established a template for how the Ed Sullivan Show would handle novelty acts and children performers. Ed learned that authenticity trumped everything else, that genuine enthusiasm could make even the most absurd premise compelling, and that his audience was willing to embrace joy wherever they found it. Gayla Peevey returned to Oklahoma City and lived a mostly normal life, though she would always be remembered as the girl who wanted a hippopotamus for Christmas. The song became a holiday classic, played every Christmas season for decades to come. Ed Sullivan continued hosting his show until 1971, always remembering the lesson that Gayla had taught him about the power of authentic performance. In his final interview, he mentioned her performance as one of the moments that reminded him why he loved television. "Entertainment," he said, "is about making people feel something real. It doesn't matter if it's Frank Sinatra singing about love, or a little girl singing about hippopotamuses. If it's genuine, if it comes from a real place, the audience will respond." The story of Ed Sullivan and Gayla Peevey proves that sometimes the most unlikely bookings create the most enduring moments. Ed's willingness to take a risk on a ridiculous Christmas song, performed by an unknown child, resulted in one of television's most beloved holiday performances. It also demonstrates the importance of trusting authentic talent, even when it doesn't fit conventional expectations. Gayla wasn't a professional performer with years of training. She was a 10-year-old girl who genuinely loved a silly song about hippopotamuses. But her sincerity and natural charm made her performance unforgettable. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and tell us, have you ever taken a chance on something that seemed ridiculous but turned out to be wonderful? Sometimes the best entertainment comes from the most unexpected places. You just have to be brave enough to give it a platform.